All right, here we are for our final installment of exactly how we work with text on web pages. So, this is going to be a quick and dirty overview of the different properties one has available to them when it comes to working with text. Please be certain to read Chapter 6 in the book. We'll do a quick sort of work through in class next week where we'll discuss and open the floor to questions or anything else you may have about anything that's covered. Next week you will be given Project 2 and you're going to have to do some text formatting, so make certain that you feel comfortable with this. So this is what we're going to start off with. We're going to start off with adding color to text, and you've already seen this. It's funny because the impulse to add color to text is to have a property of something like font color, but there isn't one. Basically, there are two ways you can apply color in CSS. One is to just say color, and one is to say background color. Background color specifically has to do with just that, the background color of the element on which you're applying that formatting. Color has to do with the foreground color, so that's going to include text and borders and any other characteristics that draw from that foreground color. So what I'm going to do is I am going to apply a color to the body. And the color I'm going to apply is sort of a light gray color. Actually, that's probably too light. Let's go maybe, there we go. All right, so I've applied a light gray color to the body as a whole. And you can see, because of the cascade, because of inheritance, it cascades all the way down. If we wanted to have a color on the headings, once again, headings are more specific, we can apply a nice dark red color. And that allows our headings to stand out a little bit. All right, so you'll notice that I am usually applying these using hexadecimal. You might remember in class we talked a little bit about how this hexadecimal shorthand works. So let me just expand it a little bit so we can kind of talk about these values again. Each of these individual pairs corresponds with a particular color of RGB values. So the first two are R, second two are G, third two are B. So the larger the number is here, and the lower the numbers are here, the more red you're going to have in something. The more green, the more blue, and so on. If you've got this sort of repeating pattern where red is 2 3s, and green is 2 zeros, and blue is 2 zeros, you can get rid of the repeating digit. But it only works if all three groups have repeating digits. If your color is like 1A, 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 it doesn't work then. If your color is 226610, it's not going to work. But if you've got any other combination wherein the R value is a repeating set of numbers, the G value is a repeating set of numbers, and the B value is a repeating set of numbers, and all three of those characteristics exist in the same hexadecimal value, then you can repeat them. As an FYI, you can also declare your colors in CSS using RGB, RGBA, HSL, and HSLA. It's discussed a little bit more in the book. We are not generally going to use those formats this semester. The examples in the book may use them, but please understand that for projects and in-class demos, that hexadecimal values are the primary way that we're going to communicate these. They are far more browser compliant and supported by a wider range of browsers, but you might encounter some of those other file formats in the book and in real life circumstances. Another characteristic you might want to declare is what's called text size or font size. Now the font size can be declared using 3 or 4 different, well 5 actually, different types of units of measurement. And it's really important that when you are declaring a font size that you use the unit of measurement. So let's say, for instance, that I want my paragraph to have a typeface of 16 pixels. Now 16 pixels is generally speaking the default size for most browsers unless somebody's gone in and physically changed those. the value, the property rather, is just font hyphen size 16 pixels. Note, there is not a space between the number and the unit of measurement. If you put a space, it will not work. So make certain that you scrunch all of that stuff up together. So I've declared a font size of 16 pixels, which, as I said, is pretty much the default font size. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bump it up to a larger typeface size. You'll see that this is actually a technique that's being used on a lot of web pages now. So let's take a look at what that does to our typeface. And as you can see, it made our paragraphs larger. But because we did not specify anything about our unordered lists, they remain the same size. But that's fine. So you can sort of see what we've got happening there. I'm also going to come in here and let's make this a darker color. Good gracious. Let's make this more like a 6, I guess. Okay. So, and let's just look at what that looks like. All right. It's a little darker. Still not all that easy to read, but all right, we'll try one more, just because I want this to actually be easy for you to see. It's still not particularly dark, but you're getting the idea. All right. Oh, actually, no wonder that's the color that I'm changing. Ha ha ha. Let's bring that down to maybe 333. Okay. There we go. So it's a little bit easier to read everything. All right, so you can see that we've increased the typeface size. It's 20 pixels. Great. Other units of measurement that you might choose include percentages. Now, what percentages do is they look at the base font size. As I've mentioned before, every browser, anybody can go into their browser and specify default font size. And if they haven't done so, it is probably 16 pixels. So the percentage that we're applying has to do with the sort of default font size. So I'm going to say 100%. And what should happen is exactly what just happened. Nothing changes. Now, on the other hand, if I decided that I wanted everything to be a little bit smaller than the default font size, so you'll notice that not everything changed. The paragraph stayed the same. Do you know why? If you don't, come and ask me in class next week and we'll discuss it. But think about the cascade and inheritance, and I think you'll figure it out. All right, so we got a chance to kind of see what percentage does. Let's look at one of the other formats that we have available to us. But before we do that, let's look at what happens if we say, in this case, so we're going to say that we want all the font sizes to be 75%. But let's say that we want our headings to remain at 100%. So if we make our headings 100%, let's see what that does. As you see, it actually didn't help anything. And the reason it didn't help anything is this. By making this 100%, it is 100% of the 75%. So percentages really build on one another. What you would have to do is you would have to increase it to something like 150% in order to have any hope of increasing the typeface size. And as you can see, by increasing it to 150%, that sort of does. And you would probably even have to go as high as 200, 250, or 300% in order to get that font size doing what you want it to. So there's percentages. Another unit of measurement you might use is what's called an M, and it works really similarly to percents. And basically what M's are they are multipliers. We look at the base font size and we decide that we want it to be a certain number of, we want it to be a certain percentage basically of that base size. So instead of saying 75%, I might say 0.75 M. And same thing with font size. I might say 1.5 M. Once again, you'll notice no space between the value and the unit. So when I hit that, you'll see that the typeface sizes don't change at all, because you have a very similar situation that happens with M's, and that is that they build on one another. Now let's say that I really, really wanted to base this font size on the base font size for H1 through H6. I just wanted to deal with that. By putting an R right before the M, which is short for relative M, I can actually do that. So let's take a look. And you'll see that now our typeface is much larger because what's happened is we've just multiplied it by the base number of M's as opposed to by the M's that have been applied to the body. The other unit that is used sometimes are keywords, and they are literally small, smaller, smallest, large, larger, largest, and there's a medium in there somewhere too. It's ridiculous, it's silly, it's really limited, and it's kind of arbitrary in terms of how it's implemented. So we're not going to use that this semester, but once again, just wanted to give you some familiarity so that you don't run into it for the first time when you're working somewhere. The last group of characteristics we're going to deal with, and I'm hoping we can get these all in the next 5 minutes, are all of the different characteristics you might change on a font. So let's take a look at some of these. One of these items is font style, and you'll see here we've got the font style as well as the font weight. What the font style does is that allows us to determine whether or not something is italicized. So let's say that I wanted my paragraph to be italics. I would say font style italic. And as you can see, it applies a sort of oblique formatting to the paragraph text. Lovely. All right. Now, as you may know, headings are by their very nature bold. That's one of those bits of browser-specific formatting that's applied to this particular element. But what about if I didn't want them to be? How would that work? Well, what you can do is you can undo that standard formatting by giving headings a font weight of normal. You can do the same thing with font style, by the way, where if you've got an element like an M or some other element that's normally italicized, by giving it a font style of normal, that will undo the italicization. All right, so let's do that. And now you can see that the bolding has been taken off of our headings. So that gave us a couple of things right there. Other characteristics we might want to look at. Let's say that we wanted to look at making all of our headings completely capitalized. That would be the text transform property. We give it a value of uppercase. And as you can see, it makes the whole thing uppercase. We talked about text decoration in the past. This is really handy when you're dealing with hyperlinks, and if you don't want those hyperlinks to have an underline, you would say text decoration none. There's also a section on page 166 where they talk about the text shadow, which is a CSS3 property, and that's certainly worthy of your attention. Line height allows you to determine how much space there is between lines. Generally speaking, the default's about 1.2. Line height is one of the few times when you're going to give a measurement and not have a unit as well. It's a multiplier. So when you say 1.2, you're saying 1.2 times the standard line height, or the height of the letters, rather. So if you wanted to increase your line height for greater readability, you might increase that number to like 1.5 or something. Text align allows you to make things on the left, on the right, or centered. Text indent allows you to indent the first line of a paragraph. And then there's shorthand, and I'm going to show you the shorthand and just talk real quickly after that about the unordered list, and then we'll be done. So let's take a look very specifically at the H's. You'll notice that we've got all of these different characteristics for fonts. Well, what we can also do is we can have a shorthand that combines all of them. Remember how we talked about the difference between a typeface and a font? Now we're getting a chance to see it in action. Because a font consists of elements like the size and the font family, and the font weight. These are all elements that can be combined into a single rule. And in fact, what you're going to find is that if it says font before it, you can probably include it in that font declaration. And what should happen is, well, we ended up with a little bit of change. And we can mess with that later. But ultimately, you can see how you combine everything into a single rule. List styles. We're going to run out of time here, But actually, I'm just going to create another short video where we'll take a look at list styles. And that's all I'm going to talk about right now.